Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop a sub, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Ryan, welcome to the World XP podcast. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing great, brother. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
100%. So, I know we've got a lot to cover, somewhat limited time. So let's jump into a quick intro of who you are and what do you do. And then as everyone knows who's watched for a little bit, we'll have the question from the last guest and then we'll jump right into your story.
All right, man. Yeah,
So,
so yep, quick intro for me. So yep, my name is Ryan Allday. I'm here currently. I'll kind of start at the beginning and roll on forward. So yeah, quick background. I joined the military at 17, spent about 11 years in there, did a couple of different jobs, got a lot of experience in different areas. Primarily towards the end was delivering curriculum, so teaching as an instructor back to the military. Jumped out of that and rolled right into a contractor job, essentially doing the same job, but as a civilian. So that allotted me a lot more time. And in all my free time, I started a CrossFit gym down there in Virginia Beach. Got that up and running, ran that the contractor job and the CrossFit gym for about 2 years until I got the gym, up to the revenue up to where I needed it to be. Then I left the contracting job and just focused on that gym for a while. Ran that for 7 years, sold it, and then, like I said, well, I built a van, and so I like an old 350 Ford van, like a construction van, built the inside of it so I could live in it, and drove that joker up to Canada, man, and went through their mountain guide program, kind of mountain guide slash outdoor adventure guide. So that was an amazing thing. The GI Bill kicked in and paid for that training program, and it paid me for living expenses. So that was literally like a year-long vacation there, man. Just climbing mountains, surfing, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, like all the fun stuff. So did that, came back to the States and played around with a couple of different business ideas, trying to see where I wanted to go from there. And I landed in real estate. Someone said, "Hey, man, real estate's where it's at." And at that time, I was literally living at a friend of mine's house in his bedroom, sleeping on the floor. So he had the bed, I was sleeping on the floor. And to learn the real estate, I would just go to the bookstore and I would sit in the bookstore until I read an entire book. I didn't buy the book, I just took notes, went home, did exactly what the book said. And I did that day in and day out. And right around month 3, I bought my first investment property for $1,000. And ironically enough, I just sold that property and made multiple six figures on that sale. So that was kind of my kickstart into real estate. So I was working the real estate and I said, "Hey man, I need it." It wasn't providing enough income and stable income in the beginning. So I said, "Hey, what kind of job can I do that fulfills my mission as a person, but also gives me enough free time to be able to pursue another business, and the fire department was that thing." So I literally drove all around Virginia for, I don't know, probably a good part of the summer, just sleeping in the van, applying to fire departments. And I was doing police departments at the same time. So literally 2 or 3 times a week, I was going through their fitness test, their written test. It was like a whole summer of just fitness tests all over Virginia. And I got picked up here in Northern Virginia and packed everything up, moved here, went through the academy. And the same time I was doing that, I was concurrently building the real estate business. So that took me about 4 to 5 years. And I got the business up to the point where it replaced the fire department income. And that kind of opened up my free time. So I'm a huge believer. If you can't tell through my story so far, I'm a huge believer in, one, having time freedom and financial freedom, but also living a life based off of experiences. I think most of our young people today, and over the past couple of generations, we've been trained on this idea of a career, right? Of this career that provides safety and security, meaning something external from yourself is giving you that safety and security in the form of insurance, in the form of retirement, and ironically, most people don't even understand what that retirement system is and how it works. So for me, I've never lived my life under that belief system. I've lived my life like, hey, we're here for a short amount of time, man. And there's so much to see in the world, and there's so many people to meet and cultures to experience that it just didn't make sense for me to commit my life 20, 30 years of the best years of my life sitting in one place, doing one thing over and over again. And really what you're doing is you're developing and growing someone else's livelihood. You're building someone else's business by doing that. So yeah, I just believed in the adventure-based life. So I've always worked to free myself from that W-2 job. So as soon as I could do that, I left the fire department and I was making enough income to live and survive. And now I recaptured all my time back, and through the trials and tribulations of that type of life, you develop and grow into a certain type of person. And I think that that type of person that you grow and develop into is extremely useful for the world now. So I'm 46 years old now, and I've lived this different style life. And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, hey, man, I can see a place where I can give back to the community. I can give back to the world because of this lifestyle, like because of the challenges and the trials that I've gone through. Like you need that to turn yourself into someone that actually can be useful, not only for yourself, but for your community. So that brings me here to Apogee. I found out about Apogee. I reached out immediately the first time I saw it, threw my name in the hat, submitted the application for or an application to be able to open a campus here in Virginia. And I think at that time there were 500 or 600 people that applied across the world, and they accepted somewhere around 50 people. And somehow I made the cut. I don't know how they did it. I don't know the process they went through, but all I know is I was in it. And then, that was the springboard. Now we're here in Virginia trying to put together a team to launch the first Apogee campus in Virginia entirely, but right here in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, 100%. And we will get to Apogee much more later for sure. Um, the question that I've got from the previous guest, who also, I'll say, he did a lot of things as well. He was an actor. He was in the movie Die Hard, and just like in all these sorts of business ventures, similar to you, just but in the kind of left home, always searching for adventure, that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
so his question to you is, uh, if you had to discern what your superpower was, what might that be?
Yeah, I love that question, man. That's a good question. How to distill down my superpower to one answer. Broadly speaking, it is my outlook on life, like the positive way that I view life. And meaning, a perfect example here in this Apogee program, I've never been a school teacher. I've never been in like the academic education world. While I've spent my entire life being a coach or a trainer in some form or fashion, I've never been in that. So my superpower is just my belief in my ability to overcome something. And that is, and the next question could probably be, well, is that superpower something that a person is born with, or is that something that is built over time? And I honestly don't know the legit answer to that. What I presume is that is a little bit of both. Like you're born with a certain, makeup, your genetics are a certain thing, but the things that you go through, the obstacles that you face in life and your ability to overcome them turn you into something. They change your mindset. When you compare a person that has, had to be on their own and have had to figure things out versus, and we can bring this down to the ground of how are you educating your child, right? Are you the type of parent that is so rushed for time in the morning and so fast to get out the door that you reach down and you tie your child's shoe or you put your child's shoes on because if you let them do it, it takes 10 minutes longer, right? And it frustrates you and you can't get out the door. So bringing it all the way back to childhood, those types of things, I believe, build a person and their ability to face obstacles and overcome. And it's just that simple. The more things that you face, the more obstacles that you voluntarily take on yourself, you're building your own superpower in that arena. It's no different than working out, joining a workout program or a boot camp program or anything like that. If the program is designed properly, you leave that a better person than you walked in the door. Like when I had the CrossFit gym, I had boot camp programs. And while it was fitness focused, the primary thing that I was doing was forging and building their mindset. So I was putting them in situations that they could not overcome on their own. They had to pull together and work together as a team to overcome something. So you learn a lot when you're in those situations. And what I noticed is my members would push harder and they would do things that they did not believe they could do because someone beside them was depending on them, right? And that's in the grand scheme of things, that's what happens in the military and the fire department and all these different arenas where you're operating in a small team. You will do more, you will sacrifice more because the person beside you is dependent on that. And all of that contributes to building yourself into something that can overcome any obstacle that you face, or you have the confidence and the ability to overcome those things. So for me, from as far back as I can remember, my life has just been an unfolding of those types of things, of those events, to where you either face it and overcome, or you don't and you fall off the side of the cliff, right? Because I didn't have people in my life to catch me from going over the cliff,
Yeah.
to catch me from falling off the side. So you navigate that, right? And everything that you face in life, you have a choice of how you're going to view that. Like I could speak about my past in a negative light, and that would paint me as a victim. That would be me assuming the victim mindset. If my conversation with myself in my head was, oh, my childhood sucked. Oh, they did this to me. Oh, the boss did that. Oh, my husband this. Oh, my wife that. Oh, the world this, right? Like you're letting yourself off the hook. You're alleviating yourself of the responsibility. And when you do that, you cannot grow, because the minute that anything bad happens in your life, the minute you tell yourself that it was because of someone else or because of something else, you've given away your power now to elevate yourself, to step up to the next level and become better. So you don't overcome the obstacle overcomes you at that point. So, long story short, man, the superpower for me is I view anything in the world as possible. Like, I don't think there's nothing that I don't believe that I could do if I put my mind to it.
Yeah. Self-belief is an amazing thing. It also comes with to go back to like sports and stuff, your belief in your own preparation, the confidence when you step on the field in a game. It's like you understand that the work that you've done and the hardships that you've overcome
Hmm.
prior to, it's like you don't perform well because you did well that day. You performed well because of all the hours and hours and hours of work and
Hmm.
overcoming injuries and the recovery and the preparation with your teammates and all that stuff, and that all culminates on match day.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same. And speaking to putting yourself through hardships, like it's very easy now to not do that. And so
Right.
it's like really, if I wanted to, I could sit on the couch and just play video games all day and order DoorDash and like
Right.
that would not be a good way of sustaining, but like that's possible now, and I would have to do literally nothing.
Right. You could
And
survive, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so you mentioned childhood. I want to jump into childhood a little bit from the standpoint of where did the military come from and what was the catalyst for that in your mind instead of maybe college or
Hmm.
going straight into like a trade school or something of that nature, right? A lot of people maybe would just go straight to a police or a fire department or straight to
Hmm.
maybe, oh, I want to be a physical trainer or something like that. But instead you went the military route. What
Hmm.
kind of in your childhood was um I guess let's start with like you at high school, freshman in high school. What kind of who were you?
Hmm.
What kind of person were you?
Bro, yeah, that's a tough one, man. So I can go back a little bit further, man, because that is a great question, and I've asked myself that many times. Like, what
Mm,
led me to the military in the first place? And as far back as I can remember, I think it was the things that I was exposed to back then, right? Like I was born in the 70s, so you saw things like He-Man and G.I. Joe and Rambo and all these things, the Terminator. And for me, I was just drawn to those things. Like as early as I can remember as a child, I would have my cousins out in the woods and I would literally be building like boot camp style obstacle courses as 6, 7, 8, 9 year old kid, right? Like I'd have ropes and trees and logs and like, doom, 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 all these different things. I was building that at that age. And probably by the time I was middle school age, I remember, and we didn't have like a computer and the internet back then, right? So I remember ordering brochures for a military school, and at like the middle school level. Like I was trying to get into a military school then. Like I was just drawn to that. Like I got the brochure in the mail, right? You didn't see it online. You got things in the mail. And I'm looking through and I'm seeing these kids in the uniform and I'm seeing them, like the discipline and it's showing them. I remember it like snapshotting like their room or the barracks and the beds were like bam, pristine and all that. And like I was
was
just,
was it chaotic at your
what do you,
home, like childhood home? Like were you looking for maybe a change of scenery or change of pace from that, or what do you think it was?
yeah,
Because
man,
I
the
was
easy,
also interested in a lot of that stuff, but I also
yeah,
maybe more to me from like a strategy point. Like I liked playing. Ooh, where do we go?
I can still hear you. Your mute
Um,
just popped off.
maybe like a
Hmm.
Risk or the games like that or things like that.
Yeah,
But then by the end of high school, I half considered it, and then I was like, nah. It's like I like
yeah.
soccer more, so I'm gonna go try and play somewhere. But like, so what do you think it was?
Yeah, man. Again, like part of it I think is nature. Like we're all individually wired a certain way, so maybe a part of that was nature. I mean, it will be the easy answer could be yes. I was trying to get away from something like that when we proceed forward to 16, 17 years old. Absolutely. Like I was by the time I was 15, 16, I was, living with other friends' parents and things like that. Just anything to get out of the house. Like there was just not, it wasn't the place for me. Right. So could that be a part of it? Man, it, yeah, it could be. It could be of trying to get away from something and get to something better. But I think I would do disservice if I put that at the top of the list of trying to
Mm,
get away from something because the pull to that particular lifestyle, and maybe I could tie it into that to where I was drawn to that discipline and just how sometimes you're around someone and they have that certain energy and you're like, man, that just feels right to me. I want more of that in my life, right? So the figures that I had, sporadically through my childhood were not necessarily that thing. So when I had the contrast of this military style, this GI Joe thing, all of this, I was just drawn to that more so than I was probably more so than I was trying to run away from something, the best that I could answer
yeah,
in
that makes sense.
in that world, right? And plus thinking back, when I think of like, man, all these things that I've done, I never sat there and thought about it long enough to think of the negative repercussions of it. Like a lot of people get wrapped up into that negative thought pattern of what if this doesn't work? What if I spend all my money on this house and they don't pay rent and they destroy the house and like my mind never did that on anything. So I always just looked at what is the potential outcome, and then I would just move in that direction. So I think that was more of the pull than it was to try to run from something.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, looking at your bio on LinkedIn, you went Navy, correct?
Hmm.
So what why Navy and not Marines, or like was it just the
Hmm.
first recruiter you talked to, or how did that come about?
No, man. So at some point in high school, the recruiters came, right?
Hmm.
The Marine recruiter, they all came there, and definitely I was heavily considering the Marines. But at that time, the Navy had the Navy SEALs, man, and that was the video that they played, right? And that spoke to me the most. Like when I looked at it, and
This would have been what, like 90s, early 90s, mid 90s?
yeah, yeah. I graduated high school in 95, right? So they had that. It was a video cassette tape, dude. He popped, and the little TV was only as big as like a laptop or something, right? And they popped it in there, and I was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to move in that direction. So that's what pulled me to the Navy was the SEALs. Hmm.
Okay, so you talk to the recruiter, you enlist, and
Hmm.
what's that like? Is there even conversation with mom and dad? Say, hey, I'm going to the Navy, or were you just off? And then at what point, what was the adjustment like going into, you get to boot camp is a totally different environment from anything that you're used to. How was the adjustment for you, or did it feel like you just fit and it was better?
Oh man, dude, I love this question. So, yeah, there was no like at that point I'd already stopped communicating with my mom for probably 5 or so years. Like I just cut her out of my life because of who she was and the things that she did. And then my dad, which, come to find out when I was 8 years old, he was actually my stepdad. I was adopted, and I found that I didn't find that out till I was 8. But yeah, him and I did not get along. Like there was nothing there. We did not get along at all. Like we butt heads on everything. So it wasn't the environment where you have conversations. Like
Mm,
there was just no, so most reflecting back on that, most of my childhood, there was not an adult figure that I communicated with really, that I had those conversations of like, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, are you struggling? Like, what do you need help with? Like, none of that. There was none of that. So, speaking on that piece, it's always been just me figuring out everything, from the beginning. So there was no conversation like at the time I enlisted, I think I was living at a friend's house, sleeping on the couch or whatever. And the only real part of that conversation was I needed them to sign the document so I could go early, right? So you can enlist early. It's called like the delayed entry program. So you can actually enlist when you're 17 if you get their signature. So that was about the gist of the conversation, was getting them to sign that so I could be on my way.
was that even a problem? They were just like, yeah, whatever, here you go.
I don't remember. I don't
Yeah,
honestly, I don't remember how the conversation went. I don't really remember a lot of it. Like I just remember in that time block we weren't on good terms. Like I'd
yeah,
already kind of moved out of the house and was doing my own thing. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't remember what that
Well,
conversation.
that's
Like,
good. The reason I ask is I remember like you hear stories of parents not wanting their kids to enlist or whatever, so they won't
mhm.
sign the papers and then they forge the signature or whatever. Um
Yeah, yeah.
um
It
so
probably would have gotten to that if they had said no. That's probably the route
yeah.
I would have done, because I did quite a bit of that on report cards and things like that for school. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so you get to so is there anything between then and boot camp that is important, or you go straight to boot camp and then what's the adjustment like getting
Hmm.
there? Like, do you fit right in? Is this what you've been missing, or is there some adjustment period from you not having really that adult figure, that authority figure? Or
Hmm.
maybe not, maybe you had an authority figure, but not a, you know what I'm getting at, right? You
Yeah.
go from not really having one to all of a sudden everything is very structured and very
Right.
authority oriented. Was that a big
Hmm.
adjustment for you?
Yeah, man. So that's the a great part, second part of that question there. So in a way, it was a big adjustment, and then in a way, I fit right in, right? So I remember I, man, dude, I remember being an 8, 9 year old kid, and I would, before school, it would be 5 in the morning or whatever. I don't even remember what kind of alarm clock I had back in like the early 90s, what it was that woke me up. But I remember being this 8, 9, 10-year-old kid in the mornings before school. I would be running in the dark and on these country back roads, just getting a run in. And dude, I didn't know what I was doing. I had these work boots on out there running miles in work boots, but just because it was military, it was hard, right? And I don't even think I was living with my mom at the time. I don't think she even knew. Like she was really you know, she was preoccupied with alcohol and other substances, right? So she didn't really know a whole lot about what was going on. But, so that was kind of who I was. Like that early on, I was doing those types of things on my own, like by myself, kid running down the road, middle of the like early morning that is pitch black out, and I'm doing these runs. So getting to boot camp, I felt like I was in love with it, dude. Like I was actually disappointed by the time I got to boot camp. I was always into fitness and in shape. And I remember very clearly in boot camp when it was time to shut it down and everyone going to bed and things like that. I would sneak out into the bathrooms and do workouts, more additional workouts in boot camp, because I was like, I'm getting out of shape here dealing with this thing. So on that side, like I fit right in. Like I remember, I just loved the challenge. The harder it was, the more I felt like I was in my lane. Like I felt like I had more energy. The more they tried to like beat us down or whatever they were doing, I loved it, man. You're in the barracks and they're like, it's concrete barracks, and when the class messes up or whatever, they're like, all right, we're gonna PT till it rains. We're gonna make it rain in here, right? From the condensation going up to the
Yeah.
concrete and then dripping down. I love that junk, man. I loved it. Like that was just my jam. So that piece, right at home, right at home.
Yeah.
The piece that, eventually, like boot camp, I had no problems in boot camp. I loved it, did awesome. um my training, I was a gunner's mate coming out of the gate, so the A school that I went to there was probably like 6 months long up in Great Lakes. No problem. Like I would, no problem with me there. But outside of the school on my own time, like I was still wild. Like we were going to hotel rooms and just burning it down all through, that area. And when I got to my first command, um, in San Diego, California, that's where like the conflict started happening with the authority figures, right? And I've, I've, man, I've dug into this with myself so many times. Like, why throughout my life have I always had that conflict with quote unquote authority? And the best answer I've come to is this: I've just had a very difficult time following someone that I don't respect, right?
Mm,
So when I had leaders, if you want to call them that, in the military, that were saying one thing and doing another and not living by the code and things like that, it was just like I didn't like it, and I just let it be known that I didn't like it. Coupled with I still just did whatever I wanted. Like I was throwing down hard on the week. I was a southern Alabama kid that got plucked out of that small town environment and dropped in Chicago and then dropped in San Diego, California. And I was just drawn to the people that were doing the bad things, man. So that's what I was doing. Yeah, so that piece was definitely the conflict. Like I didn't fall in line right away with the program for sure.
mm.
Hmm.
So, okay, so you mentioned gunner's mate and the A school, and
Hmm.
and also you mentioned the SEALs is one of the reasons why you got in. Was that, did you go to Buds? How was that? How did that
Hmm.
process go? Did you have to submit? Do you have to get somebody to sign off like, hey, yeah, he might get through Buds? Because obviously well, not
Yeah.
obviously, people that don't know, not a lot of people get through that.
Hmm.
So how did that work out?
Yeah, so I eventually made it, got my application in, made it to I went to Buds, and did really well. Did really, really well. I was the class leader for my class there, and did really well, made it through Hell Week. And we're skipping all kinds of stuff out of the story. But so in my mind, I was like, all right, once I get through Hell Week, I'm gonna bring my family out because I had a 3-year-old daughter. I
Mm-hmm.
had two daughters at the time. My youngest was 3, and they came out. I was like, all right, once I get through Hell Week, I'm gonna bring them out and for a visit. But until then, I'm gonna stay focused on
Yeah.
the training, right? And I was at the upper age. I think maybe I had to get a waiver for how old I was to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at the upper age at that time. So it was
What time frame was this?
this was like '06,
Okay, so
probably
we're
around
already the
2000,
wars are already well
probably around
underway at this point.
2006. Yeah,
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 okay.
everything's going on. And so I get in there, start doing my thing, made it through Hell Week, got a little bit, injured or whatever, but I was feeling okay. Got through that and I brought the family out. So I didn't, long story short, I didn't finish. I quit Buds after a couple of weeks after Hell Week. And what I've been able to distill down and the message for people that I learned in that thing is that I had two chinks in my armor at that time, two things that I can point to that say this is really the reason that made me make the decisions that I made. And one of them was my daughter. When she came out, she was 3 years old at the time, and she didn't recognize me. Like maybe it was because I was so messed up after Hell Week, or maybe it was because of the amount of time that had gone by that she didn't see me. So she didn't recognize me when I was like, "Oh, hey," like trying to pick her up or give her a hug. So that hit me. Her mom, who I was with at the time, she 100% did not support me going. I remember right before going into Hell Week, I was communicating with her, and literally the message I got right before starting Hell Week was, when you come home, there's not going to be a home. Like we're going to be gone. We're not going to be there. So I rolled into probably the hardest physical training I've ever done with that in my mind. And then the other thing was during Hell Week, I did something to my ankle and I wasn't able to fin with one foot, right? So after Hell Week, she didn't recognize my daughter didn't recognize me. That was eating in my mind. And the injury that I had on my foot, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna pass. Like we were doing weekly 2-mile swims. Like you had to do the 2-mile swim in a certain amount of time. And I was like, there's just no way I can do it. So with those two things, I was like, I'm out.
Mm.
I'm out, right? And that is probably one of the most regretted decisions that I ever made now, looking back on it, because when I did that, um, the whole command, the cadre, the instructor staff there was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? They tried to talk me into staying. They were like, no, you can, like, they didn't want me to quit. But my mind was set up, man. I was like, dude, my daughter didn't recognize me. If I go through this and I deploy, I'm going to be gone way more than I am now. What is that going to look like? And I'm injured. I'm probably not going to make the next swim anyway. So then I tapped out at that point. Yep.
It's interesting to me that well, I understand why you regret that decision now, but I
Hmm.
also understand fully why you made it at the time. Because I think a lot of people, and I have to remind myself of this, but when you're at the end of your life, you want the people that your family and friends around you at the end, and maybe you get through buds, but is that worth ruining a relationship, which you said didn't seem to work out anyways. But
Hmm.
um, so I don't in my head I listen to that and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's probably the right decision at that time. I mean, obviously I don't know the ins and outs of what their relationship was like, but
Hmm.
um, I have I've heard stories of family like dying alone, like nobody comes to the funeral or anything like that, and like that to me is
Hmm.
like way more important than any I don't know. Obviously, there's a balance. There's a balance to the things that you want to accomplish in your own life, but at what cost, right? You hear
Hmm.
people who are super successful, like millionaires and billionaires, that just work gazillion hours a week, and their family relationships are ruined, and
Hmm.
like and their kids who have had on paper amazing lives, like don't even want to talk to their mom or dad or whoever it is. So
Right, right.
so that's an interesting dynamic. I wonder. And I know, like you said, we skipped a lot of stuff, but in the interest of time, I want to touch on that a little bit. What was
Hmm.
where did the regret come from? Did it come from the fact that it didn't work out afterwards, or was there like was the regret that you didn't complete it, or
Yeah.
like where is that? Because I don't think there's any me talking to you and just listening. I don't think there's any shame or there needs to be regret in that decision
Hmm.
based on the humanity of you and your daughter and all that stuff. But obviously you want to complete what would probably would have been the hardest thing in your life up to that point, I would think. So
Right.
yeah, that's a big split to have. So I don't know what were the thoughts and like afterward, immediately afterwards, right? You get through Hell Week with that thought in your
Hmm.
head and
Hmm.
then after that it's kind of like, well, I got through that. I can get through the rest of it for sure, but there was still something that was like, no, I can't.
Hmm.
Like the mental kind of battle within you must have been crazy at that point and shortly afterwards, I can imagine.
Oh, for a long time afterwards, man. Like dude, that decision definitely haunted me. Like for years, I would have dreams about it, man. I would have dreams like I was right back there at Bud's, and like in those dreams, I was the happiest motherfucker that I'd ever been, like being back in that, right? So, and then I would wake up and just be fucking disappointed, like floored, like, God, you're a fucking idiot, man. So yeah, that was a tough one, dude. That took a long, long time, 10 plus years probably, for me to really process that and come to terms with it, because I knew I had what it took to complete the training, right? Even like looking back, maybe at the time I didn't realize it, but looking back now, like I the injury wouldn't have stopped me. Like worst case scenario, I probably would have gotten rolled back in
Yeah.
training or something like that, right? So for me, it was just that combination of the psychological side of that of my daughter hitting me, and then the physical injury. Like those two were just like the chink in my armor that was like it gave me the out is what it did.
Hmm.
Like, and that's the part that I felt guilty about, is like, hey, those two things gave me the out, right?
Yeah.
So it took a long time to work through that and come to a good place in my mind. And what that did, how that manifested itself moving forward for me was like, man, I just I approached everything at life with that same intensity as Bud's, right? So when I started the gym, it was like I need to be the best. Like I was heavy in competing, like I competed nationally in the CrossFit competitions and everything. And like, dude, I was training like I was like a monk, man. I was training like 6 hours a day. I lived at the gym. I lived in the back of the gym. Like once me and my youngest daughter, once me and her mother separated, I moved into the gym. I lived there, and like that was my life right there doing that. So I commit, like what the outcome of dropping out of Buds kind of anchored a deeper commitment to things moving forward.
Mm.
You
Can
know,
I
but yeah, go ahead.
so I've got two thoughts there, especially regarding, well, maybe not the injury, but is there so the analogy of the preparation on the sport on the like soccer field that I used
Hmm.
earlier, when you would have those dreams and you wake up disappointed, did you ever have the flip side where you said, you know what, all the preparation and everything I've done up to this point led me to this decision, and I know myself that I took everything into account and I made the right decision. I'm not asking you to not regret the decision, obviously, because if you
Hmm.
think that you could have done it, that's an amazing accomplishment, and of course there will be regrets with that. But did you ever have the flip side where it's like yeah, maybe I could have, but for the sake of my daughter, this was the right decision. And moving forward, that's optimal. And then on top of that, you talked about the self-belief as your superpower. Is there ever a time where maybe the better option is to, right, retreat and fight another day? Is that like where does that sort of thing enter into your mindset, if at all, right? Because you don't want to run into a situation where it's like you're not going to succeed. Not that Buds was that situation, but there are times where
Hmm.
it's like this obstacle is like maybe I need help, or maybe it's time to recover and fight again another day. Do those
Hmm.
thoughts ever enter? Because it sounds like, well, I guess I'll just leave it there. Do you have thoughts on those two things?
Mm. Could you ask the question again? Like distill all of that down to
Yeah.
a clear question so I can orient my answer for you.
Yeah, for sure. So the first is so the second part about retreating and fighting another day is kind of a supplement to the first part, which is um the everything that had gone up into your life up until that point. Did you have the um maybe peace within yourself to say like, yes, I'm disappointed that I didn't complete this amazing thing,
Hmm.
but for the sake of my daughter, this maybe was the right decision, and have to like grapple with
Hmm.
your priorities versus your daughter's priorities, and like what it means
Hmm.
to have a child and like look out for somebody else, not necessarily in like a selfless or selfish way, but as
Hmm.
at like a philosophical level of everything I've done up to this point. I know that within myself as a human being, um, I don't have to, I can hate that I wasn't able to accomplish this thing, but I don't have to regret that decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I got you. Okay, so yeah, that's a great question, man. So, like I said, this process for me to be okay with that took years, probably over 10, right? And the first place that I landed in my mind of justifying it was that this is the thought process. I'm like that I me speaking to myself, like, dude,
Hmm.
it's probably a good thing that you didn't make it through that because you're kind of out of control. Like you take more risk than the average person should take, right? So how did I justify it in my mind? I said, man, if you would have stayed there and you would have deployed, you probably would have gotten yourself killed because you would take risk that you didn't need to take because of like just your personality, how you are. Like I've never been afraid of the alternative to living, right? Like I've never had that fear. Like I don't believe in being afraid to die because if you're, for one, we all know it's going to happen. Like death is inevitable for every one of us. And if you don't, I believe that if you don't have a good relationship with that idea, you will not, you will never be able to live the life that you're capable of living because you're really just existing at that point. Like you're not living your life, you're existing if you live in that perpetual fear. So that's the first step of how I justified it. Like you probably would have died way sooner than you would have otherwise. So you made the right decision, right? And then further down the road, like that went away because that's a BS way excuse out of it, right? I haven't died yet, and I've done all kinds of crazy things and adventures and things like that. So I threw that away, and then I came to the place. I landed at the place of, it sounds so cliche when you say everything happens for a reason, but that's really where I landed is like, hey, if I would have continued on through that program and completed it, my life would have been amazing. My life is amazing right now of going in this direction. So I'm truly have landed in that place to where all that stuff that we hold on to as people for regret and that we beat ourselves down, all we're doing is stopping ourselves from living right now. So no matter what, your life has the opportunity to be the absolute best that it could be. No matter excuse me, no matter what you did not accomplish, no matter what you failed in the past, everything. And I think Alex Hermosi said it, in the context of business, that it doesn't matter that you've tried this business and failed. The point isn't the business. The point is you're building yourself through these things, right? So when I was really able to sit with that and like absorb that, like, you know what, that's true. That is not a reflection of me as a man, right?
Mm,
Because with the women that I had been with at that point, it was very, I don't know if transactional is the right word, but it put I was in the place to where I was constantly having to prove that I am a man, that I am a good person, right? So that once I landed in that place of no matter what, as long as you're holding the space in your mind that whatever happens to me, whatever I face today or tomorrow in life is just an opportunity for me to grow and develop me. That is actually how a human is built, right? If you look at the process for how a home is built, there's a process. This is the process for us. Failure, not or attempting something and not giving our best, right? That is a process for building a human only if you view it from that perspective, right? Only if you take that and turn it into something good. So you have to, I believe that no matter what happens in your life, the worst thing possible, it is a recipe for you to become the best thing possible. Like the deeper the wound, the harder the trials and the tribulations that you go through, the greater your potential on the other side. I think they're like absolutely tied together, just like say loving a person, right?
mm-hmm.
We all want to be loved by someone. We want someone to love us unconditionally, right? And we want to love someone unconditionally. But the limit on that amount of love that you can receive is the amount of pain that you're willing to accept if that fails, right?
Yeah.
So you can only love someone to the depth that you're willing to allow them to hurt you. So what that means is if you're guarded, if you're only giving them a certain amount of you, most people are stuck in that dichotomy of not wanting to get hurt, but desperately wanting to be loved and not realizing that you're blocking your own love, you're blocking your own blessings by protecting yourself, right? And life is the exact same way. When you talk about risk and danger, like the more you protect yourself from those things, the more you're protecting yourself from living your ideal life. It's just the same. The more you're willing to be vulnerable with a person, the higher the chance of you having a deeper connection with that person. And it goes against logic. It goes against what we want to believe because we're like, no, I don't want to get hurt anymore, so I'm going to protect myself. But in protecting yourself from the pain, ironically enough, you're protecting yourself from the love, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is that like 360, that's where I ended up landing with it is like I have to accept that and believe that my decision to do that, it was has the potential to contribute to me becoming something better on the back end.
Yeah.
and that's how
100%.
and that's how I landed at peace with it. Like I don't really have those dreams anymore. Like I don't regret it. Like I still think about it and wish that I had done that, but it's not like it's not strong. It doesn't hold me down anymore. Like it's a thought and it's like, yeah, man, that's a piece of your life. And now we're moving in this direction.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, that's awesome stuff. I think just looking at the time. Damn, we could do it. Yeah, we could
What
have done
time
a
is it?
show. Almost 10. Almost 10. We could have done a Sean Ryan style like 5 hour
Oh,
hour
bro, like
thing.
this is my
Um,
jam, dude. This is
yeah.
my jam.
100%. So let's go to Apogee. So I think based off the rest of our conversation, we'll probably spend the rest of the time on Apogee. But
Okay.
so let's run through for people listening who have no idea what it is or anything about it. Maybe a brief kind of summary of what it is, and then
Hmm.
obviously you spoke a bit about how you got involved already. But we can maybe after the summary we can kind of go from there and further detail on what it is and how it's meant to help people.
Hmm. Yeah, man. So Apogee as a whole, there's kind of two different things. There's Apogee, and then there's there's the Apogee men's, women's, young men's program. So there's the mentorship side that strictly focuses, excuse me, on mentorship for either men, women, or children. And then there's the education side, which is, what Apogee Nova is. We're launching an education center here in Northern Virginia, right? And then, well, what does that mean, education center? Do you mean school? Do you mean public school? Do you mean private school? Is it homeschool? Is it a co-op, right? So what I've learned in my life is I try to be very careful with using these words that people have certain attachments to, right? Like, so any given word can mean something completely different to you than it means to me based off of how I grew up, right? So when I speak about things, especially when I'm speaking to the families about what it is that we're doing, I try to speak in belief systems and philosophies instead of keywords like, oh, we're a private school, oh, we're this, we're that, right? So the best way I describe it is that let's say that you're a parent and you're on a mission to give your child the absolute best possible chance to be a successful human being, however you want to define that. How does your family, your lineage, your community define success? Okay. If that is your mission, then what is it that you will expose your child to accomplish that mission? That's what Apogee Nova is, right? We're a community of people that believe in a certain mission, and now the program is going to be designed to accomplish that mission. So, how do we educate our children in a way that they're successful humans, right? Not how do we educate them so they can pass this test, not how do we educate them so that they can get into college, or how do we educate them so that they, you know, can go out and do, or I guess I got off track there. It's not any of those things. What it is how do we educate them to be a good human and everything that involves, right? So a piece of that is academics, 100%, right? But that's not the whole thing. Like the program that most children are going through now is just very linear and is very, it's just academics. It doesn't address the person, right? We basically leave out the person. We put the child on pause, essentially. Like, okay, we're not going to explore your interest. We're not going to explore your passions. We're not going to educate you in a way that works for you. We have this system and you have to conform to this system, right? And that does nothing for the child. That does nothing for the person that we're building. It almost just puts it on hold, right? Because once you finish high school, then what's the next step for most children? What do they get? You either go to work, um, learn a trade, or go to college, right? There's still nothing of what do you love? They've spent their whole childhood up until 18 years old not exploring their passions or their interest or getting exposed to cultures or different things in the world, right? So when we look at education from this broad sense of what does it take to be successful, well, we have to start at the foundation. Like the foundation is health and nutrition in the home, right? What does health and nutrition look like? What does it mean? How can you be the best version of yourself? Well, you have to start out by still being alive and capable. So health and nutrition is in there. So then what else do we layer in there? So we layer Socratic style conversation into the education because we want our children to be free thinking. If you grow up in a system, you know the system. You're not able to think and distill your information. You're not able to stand up for yourself. All you become is a follower of some authority figure. So we kind of wipe that off the board and we deliver our education through conversation. Like, because the idea behind a Socratic conversation is we're not looking for the answer. Like, hey, Bobby, do you know what are all the states on the East Coast, right? We're, we're not looking for a regurgitation of data. We're looking for the underlying belief systems that shape who you are, right? So we have to put a focus on that, not just academic data that you need, but we need you to be able to understand who you are and why you are what you are. And that's where the Socratic conversations come in. So it's like, hey, what do you think about what do you think it means to be a good person? Like, so we pull the class together and we have that conversation. What does it mean to be a good person, right? Okay, then the learners, they speak on it. Like, well, we think it means this, we think it means that. Okay, awesome. What does it mean to respect your classmates? Oh, it means this, it means that, right? And then we're taking notes and we can write this down and now we can put it on the wall in the studio. So now instead of us walking in there and saying, hey, we're the instructors, listen to us, these are the rules that you have to follow, you've now created your system that you're going to follow, right? And when you do that, what is the result? What is the result of that? Well, you probably know you get buy-in. Just like in your company, you get buy-in, you get belief in the system because now you are a contributor. You contributed to it, right? So that's kind of like the philosophy that we're following, and we're doing things as closely as we can to mimic real life, meaning that we're doing a lot of projects. We're going on a lot of field trips. We're going, to different places and like farms and things like that, to where they're learning by application. They're learning how to do things in real world scenarios, right? And we're bringing people in. So we're reaching out to all all sorts of members and businesses in our community to bring these experts in to expose the children to that, right? So then when we're going through this process of doing these projects and going to these different places, we see that a certain child has a spark for that, and they're like, wow, they're super passionate. So now we can start opening doors and following that passion and that and what they are drawn to, instead of putting walls around them and saying, this is who you are, this is where you need to be, this is what you need to know at these different levels, right? You waste a lot of time when you operate that way. If we operate from the standpoint of mastery of something, what that looks like is, say we're doing math and the lesson plan for today is do these 30 math problems, right? We administer that to 10 different children. Well, over here, these guys may do 5 of those problems and they've mastered it. Why would we waste the rest of the time on those next 25 problems, right? We can move them along to the next phase and move them along to the next phase because we're operating from a place of mastery, not you're 5 years old, this is where you are and this is what you need to know, right? So you wind up holding some people back and you wind up pushing some people into a place that they're not ready for. So
Mm,
when we do it the way that we're doing it from that mastery standpoint, they're getting that one-on-one attention from the coach, from the guide, to help them understand where they are, what the problem is, and then they overcome it, and then we move on. So we're not, you know, pigeonholing people into just this one thing. And what that does, when you compound that over months and years of their life, how much further down the road are they, not just from the academic standpoint, but in understanding who they are and what they're passionate about, their understanding of the world and how the world works, right? Because they've been doing that the whole time. We haven't put that on pause by sticking them in an institution with desks and locking them in there for what, 8 hours a day, 12 plus years of their life.
yeah.
Like, what could you build if you approached education 12 years differently? Imagine what kind of child you would create if you did that, right? And that's what homeschoolers are doing.
Yeah. So how do you go about, right, for example, using that exact everything you just said is one of the
Mhm.
reasons why I'm doing individual and small group soccer stuff rather than coaching at a club.
Right.
Because each kid needs something different, and while you can maybe work on certain things as a team to really develop each individual player, you really need to have them or maybe one or two others, right?
Hmm.
So How do you guys plan to um sustain that in terms of, right, you get more applicants and more kids, right? Then you need more
Hmm.
guides.
Right, right.
And for those listening, the Apogee calls uh teachers, they call them guides, so that's why
Hmm.
we're using that word. You need more guides, and so how do you get more guides that are of the same mindset and the same um philosophical, like, underlying values that aren't
Hmm.
just teachers that want a new job? And so how do you
Hmm.
sustain that and make it scalable, right? Because at a
Hmm.
certain point, if you have more demand,
Hmm.
then you have a price point where it's like, well, if you want the parents to be involved, but it's expensive, both parents have to be
Hmm.
working and they can't, and you end up in this kind of weird situation where it's like, this sounds great, but we can't
Hmm.
afford that because it's specialized, um, like, learning and stuff. And so, right, you mentioned before to me that you didn't want um parents to treat it as just daycare, because that's not what it is.
Right.
But then there's a financial reality, especially living in this area,
Hmm.
where that might not be the most possible, especially if you want to afford to send your child to a place like that. So, like, how would that all work in your mind? Because obviously there's a very new thing across the country. I think what, a couple hundred locations, something like that, across the country. So
Yeah, like 50.
what's kind of the idea there, um for that part of it, for like the guides and then the
Hmm.
parents who are looking at it, but they're like, oh, we can't, we want our kid but we can't, like,
Hmm.
how is that gonna, or what's your vision for that?
Yeah, man. So that is a lot of questions inside of one question to address, right? There's a
It
lot
is,
of
yeah.
layers there. So
Yeah,
from the guide standpoint, we're keeping the studios pretty small. So one, we're breaking up the children by age groups, not by grades, right? So again, real life, where else do you go that you're separated and only with people your age that you
nowhere.
operate and work with, right? Nowhere. So why do we why do we implement that model with children now, right? If we're interested in creating or giving them the opportunity to be the best that they can be. So we open up this studio and we say we're going to take 4 to 7 year olds, right? And now we have one guide per 15 learners. But what happens is, again, we're looking at creating the best human possible that mimics success in the real world. So now we have a 4 year old in a studio with a 7 year old. So, say, for example, the 4 year old has no desire to read, doesn't even like books, right? But the 7 year old loves books. Like they've been reading for a year or so now, and like they love books. So the 4 year old's here, the 7 year old's here. What did we just create by putting them in the same studio? In that gap, there's a vacuum, right? And that vacuum is this 4 year old now sees this older learner getting praise, getting recognition, doing well for doing something. And what do kids do?
Seek that out.
They seek that out. They want to be like that, right? Like this is human nature. Children mimic, they model and mimic behaviors, right? So now instead of us having to go to this 4 year old and put all this extra time and energy and try to push them, say, no, this is what you need to be learning, we've created a vacuum in the space. And that vacuum makes them want to learn. We're creating environments to where they're being pulled along, right? So how does that play out as we grow? Well, now the 7 year old, what has he effectively become? A
A
leader,
guide,
a
yeah.
guide, a mentor, right? So he's learning leadership at that early age. And this one over here is learning how to be a good follower, which is the recipe for becoming a good leader, right? So we're creating this microcosm of real life inside the studios to where if you look at it from the lens of public school, you're going to be confused and not know how it works, right? But if you look at it from the lens of this is what real life looks like, and children are far more capable than we give them credit for. Most parents handicap their children from the get-go, from birth. They're handicapping their children in the name of love, right? So I'm not putting parents down. It's just a misunderstanding of what it takes to grow a true effective human. Children are way more resilient and strong and determined and passionate than we give them credit for. We handicap them. We cut their legs out from under them in the name of love and safety and protection, right? Whereas it's like that saying, man, like if you want to be brave, how do you get bravery? You don't become brave by thinking about bravery. You don't become brave by reading about bravery. You become brave by overcoming fear, right? You become resilient by overcoming obstacles. So you have to give yourself and your children the thing that you are afraid of to build them into the thing that you want them to be, right? That's the recipe. So when we're looking at the education from that, how do we give them those little mini challenges that are appropriate for them, that they can bump up against, and it's rough, but then the coach guides them over the obstacle, right? We don't remove the obstacle because now we've removed the opportunity for them to become more resilient, to become more self-reliant. We've removed the opportunity for them to become more like to believe in themselves. So we have to let them bump up against these walls so they can start learning how to overcome and not fall apart because they can't tie their shoe and fall on the floor and do all like we're creating the problems that we don't want through our actions,
Yeah.
right? We're creating that and we're doing it, but a lot of different reasons, but efficiency is one reason why we're doing it. We don't have time. We're too busy, right? So unfortunately, there will be a contingent of families that we will not be a good fit for, right? Because they're not willing to sacrifice themselves what it takes to sacrifice for their children, right? So if we're looking at it from the efficiency standpoint, we're looking at it from, that the standpoint of making our lives easier. That's the same thing I spoke about earlier. You don't get a better life by avoiding the hardships in life. You have to overcome those things. So part of it is like, hey, we talk with the parents, like we know that we're asking a lot of you. We know we're going to ask you to contribute to this, but if you truly believe in what this mission is and you want a community of good men and women around your child, and you want a good community of children for your child to be around, it takes sacrifice and you have to put in, right? You have to put in the work. So that kind of addresses that guide thing to where the guide is literally there, a guide, like it's a self-directed thing. So we're providing opportunity and we're providing opportunity for inspiration for them to move in those directions. And when we take all these barriers of learning out and we actually let them be what they are, they excel, right? They flourish in that as long as we stop handicapping our children and cutting their legs out from under them, they will flourish. Like this human nature. You give them the opportunities, they're going to do it. They're going to overcome these challenges, right? So it's the opposite of I think our culture of advancement and making everything easier. The easier, business that is good for business to make life easier, to create products and systems and everything to where you don't even have to grow your own food and kill animals anymore. You can sit on your couch and someone will bring you dinner, right? So that's awesome for the business that's providing it, but what is that teaching your children if they need to be able to provide for themselves? So, there's a lot that kind of goes into that.
Yeah.
And that from the guide standpoint, that is our job, is to create the environments, create the inspiration, and help them along their path because
Yeah.
they are going to educate themselves. Like if we make education interesting instead of, instead of sitting them down and trying to have them memorize and regurgitate something, what if we build something? What if we build a birdhouse? What if we build a dog house? And then that grows as the children grow and they get to the next age group. What if they're building a shed? And then what if our graduating students, 16, 17, and 18, they build a house by the time they're 18 years old, right? So what does it take to do that? Well, you have to understand all sorts of different things from engineering to math. You have to read, you have to understand blueprints. Like there's the education, right? You're
Yeah.
getting educated there to where it's applicable the knowledge that we want them to know, we make it applicable in real world things that draw their interest. So if we create the environment to where they're yearning for more, they're reaching for more, which is what we will do, what humans do. If we create that environment, then they're going to drive the bus themselves. We're just the bumpers at the bowling alley, right? We
Mm.
keep them from falling off the cliff here and we keep them from drowning over here. But aside from that, that's what we're doing. We're pointing this big ship and letting them navigate their world, letting them navigate their interest, right? And that's what we believe is the fundamental best way to educate them, is not through forcing information down their throat, is through providing them exciting, enticing opportunities that they want to move towards.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. Where can, if the people are interested in reaching out or finding you guys, where's a good spot for them to do that?
Yeah, man. So right now we're on Instagram and we're on Facebook. Apogee Nova for both of those is pretty easy to find. We're the only one. And then our website is simply apogeenova.com. APOGEE Nova for Northern Virginia.com.
Sounds great. All those links will be in the description. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Nah, man, this was good, dude. I appreciate the questions. They're very good, thought-provoking questions that lead to good conversation. So, man, I appreciate you doing what you're doing, brother.
Yeah, 100%. Likewise, and I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again at some point in the future for sure. All right, guys, for those listening, go check the links out in the description, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.
See you, bro.